Welcome back to the deep dive.
If you've ever had one of those emotional reactions that just feels, well, totally out of proportion, just way too big for what's happening, then this deep dive is definitely for you.
Hmm.
Today, we are going deep into therapeutic methods that see things like anxiety or fear, not just as, psychological issues, but as echoes. Echoes of unresolved energy that the soul itself is carrying.
That's really the core idea here. We're looking at two really crucial approaches. Introspective hypnosis, which was systematized by Antonio Sangio,
Yeah.
and then the foundational work, past life therapy, or TVP, from Dr. Jose Luis Kabuli.
And our sources describe these methods as building a bridge between our conscious, logical mind and the intuitive, sometimes painful truths that are held deep in our subconscious.
Right. It's about the gap between the stories we tell ourselves and the history our soul actually holds.
So our mission today is to figure out how these techniques actually work.
Yeah.
How do they let someone get past all the mental chatter to find and then heal the real root of a problem, no matter which lifetime it started in? A huge question.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this with introspective hypnosis, or IH. This is Antonio Sangio's integrated approach. It's described as multidimensional and spiritually attuned.
It is. And what's so fascinating about Aish is how Sanjo built on earlier work from Aurelio Mejia. He didn't just add to it, he created a whole holistic system for responding to suffering.
A system that recognizes that our issues aren't just in our heads.
Exactly. He saw that they often have a mental part and an energetic part, and you have to address both at the same time.
So that's the foundation blend that makes it so unique. It starts with something like Ericksonian hypnosis.
Which is all about metaphor and accessing the unconscious in a sort of indirect way.
But then he layers on these really intense spiritual elements.
Precisely. IH brings in traditional regression therapy, even going back to the womb, but then it adds these core spiritual steps, things like forgiveness processes, soul entrapment work, and this is critical, spirit releasement concepts.
Wait, okay, that's a big jump. If the base is Ericksonian, which is very psychological, why bring in spirit release? Why merge those two worlds?
Because the whole idea behind IH is that a lot of symptoms, anxiety, compulsions, that sort of thing, are either made worse or are actually maintained by, well, by energetic attachment.
Yeah.
Or by these unprocessed soul fragments.
So you can't solve an energetic problem with a purely psychological tool.
You just can't. If a client's own subconscious is showing them what they feel is an attached energy, ignoring that is just, it's not going to work. IH gives you the tools to address both the story in the mind and the perceived energetic issue, often at the same time.
That makes a lot of sense. So the goal isn't just to manage the fear anymore.
Right.
It's to find out what created that vulnerability in the first place. It sounds like IH just. It validates the client's inner world, no matter how strange it might seem from the outside.
It absolutely does. An IH session is structured to follow the client's own journey. You go back to the root cause, you explore the memory, and then you work through things like forgiveness, soul fragmentation, and releasing any of these attached energies.
And the goal of all that is...
What? Soul-level understanding. Real closure that finally breaks that energetic loop.
Okay, so let's shift to the foundation that a lot of this is built on. Past life therapy, TVP. This comes from Dr. Jose Luis Kabuli, who was known for being, I guess, a real purist with his technique.
He was. Dr. Kabuli was a surgeon, actually, before he dedicated his life to this. And it's important to note, Antonio Sangio is really instrumental today in preserving and teaching Kabuli's very specific, non-directive methods. He keeps them authentic.
So what are the core ideas of TVP? What allows it to reach issues that didn't even start in this life?
Well, TVP is built on three main premises. First, that emotional conflicts, chronic symptoms, they can often trace back to events that happened before this life. Second, and this is huge, unresolved trauma. It doesn't just disappear when the body dies, especially from really intense or violent events. It imprints itself on the soul as these residues. Guilt, fear, anguish.
So if the soul is carrying around that ancient baggage, how does that actually show up today? Is that why we have these fears that make no logical sense?
Yes. That unresolved emotional charge becomes an energetic imprint. And the third premise is that we all have this natural ability to access those memories when our soul is finally ready to heal.
And the reason they feel so irrational has to do with time, right?
Exactly. This is where it gets a little mind-bending. For the soul, time just doesn't exist. It's not linear.
Past and present are all happening at once.
They coexist. So a trauma from, say, a violent death in the 17th century can be instantly and physically triggered by something happening right now. A smell, a sound, a feeling of being trapped, anything that just resembles the original event.
So the panic attack isn't about being stuck in traffic today. It's about feeling trapped and suffocating in a mind collapse centuries ago. And the traffic jam it ripped open that old wound.
Precisely. And that's why the scope of healing in TVP is so massive. It's not just for big phobias. It can address chronic anxiety, depression, destructive patterns in relationships, even psychosomatic things like migraines or allergies. You're resolving the energetic source, not just trying to manage the symptom on the surface.
Let's get into the healing mechanism itself, because this seems to be what separates this deep work from just, remembering a story. What state of mind is needed for this?
So Kabuli's method is known for its purity. It's completely non-suggestive. The therapist doesn't say, maybe you had a past life, nothing like that. The subconscious reveals exactly what it needs to. And the state you're in is called the expanded state of consciousness.
Okay, how is that expanded state different from, say, a standard deep hypnotic trance?
In a deep trance, your analytical mind kind of steps aside. You become more suggestible. But in the expanded state, you're still completely aware of the present. You're in the therapist's office in a chair.
And at the same time,
And at the same time, you are fully experiencing another dimension. The soul's reality. This dual awareness is key. It lets you witness your own healing, connect with your higher self, and it's that higher self that chooses the memory that needs healing.
which brings us right to this concept of revivencia. Our sources are really clear on this. Just understanding the story, just analyzing it. That's not enough.
It is entirely insufficient. This is, you could say, the non-negotiable heart of Kabuli's work. Healing requires the full sensory, emotional reliving of the original trauma, the revivencia.
So if you just remember you died in a fire, that doesn't do anything.
Nothing changes. The stored emotional energy is still there.
But, the idea of reliving that kind of trauma,
Yeah.
feeling the suffocation, the pain, it sounds incredibly difficult, maybe even re-traumatizing. Why is that intensity required?
That's a critical question. And it's necessary because that energy is somatic. It's stored physically, energetically in the body and soul. To free that piece of your soul that's anchored to that moment, you have to complete the unfinished emotional circuit. You have to discharge it.
So if someone drowned in a past life, they literally have to relive the panic, the feeling of the water, the moment they knew they were dying. You have to finish the act.
Exactly. They have to feel the blade or the fall or the suffocation. It's that final, intense discharge of the stored fear or pain. That's the moment the subconscious finally accepts that the experience is over.
And when that happens, the energy is cleared.
The energetic residue is gone, and once that emotional debt is paid through revivencia, the symptom in this life just disappears because its source has been removed. It's less like therapy and more like spiritual energy work.
And that deep discharge is what addresses the core problem we mentioned earlier, soul entrapment. So if revivencia is the cure, soul entrapment is the disease. How do we define that?
Soul entrapment is what happens when a traumatic event is just too overwhelming to be processed. A violent death, a sudden shock. In that moment of agony or confusion, a fragment of the soul's energy gets anchored. It's frozen in time, right at the point of trauma.
And what does that trapped piece of the soul do to a person now, in their current life?
It's a huge burden. That trapped part is still feeling the original fear or shame or rage. It's constantly reliving those feelings just beneath the surface of your conscious mind.
Which creates a feedback loop.
A draining feedback loop. It influences your behavior now. It can manifest as chronic anxiety or intense jealousy or phobias. The symptoms seem totally disproportionate now, but to that part of your soul stuck in the past, they make perfect sense.
And this entrapment, it's not just from past lives, right? Could happen in this life, too.
Absolutely. While violent deaths in past lives are a common source, you can have entrapment from trauma in this life. Accidents, emotional shocks, even things that happen in the womb. The key is just that the trauma was too much to process at the time.
This brings up the idea of reactivation. How does a trauma from, the 15th century suddenly become a problem for someone today?
Right. So the past life trauma often lies dormant. It waits for a trigger in this life. The sources give a perfect example. Someone who died by strangulation in a past life is then born in this life with the umbilical cord wrapped around their neck.
Ah, so that moment of birth, which has that echo of being strangled, that's the catalyst.
That's the reactivation moment, exactly. That struggle for breath violently reminds the soul of the ancient trauma, and it locks the full emotional charge into the person's current nervous system.
And that could lead to a lifetime of panic attacks or claustrophobia?
Or even trouble swallowing. And for the healing to be complete, you have to address both. You have to relive and release the original past life trauma and the reactivation event from this life. It's a two-step process.
Wow, that really shows how complex this can be. It's like multi-layered detective work.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the practical side. What does it actually take to master these techniques?
Well, it's more than just theory. The Master Practitioner program that integrates both IH and TVP is a huge commitment. It's a 200-hour training. It's designed to really tune the practitioner into the soul's journey across time, across lifetimes, across dimensions.
So the training has to be incredibly broad. It has to prepare someone to deal with suffering from this life, the womb, past lives, and even that spiritual interference, stuff, lost souls, energetic intrusions, all of it.
It does, but real competence, especially when you're dealing with the intensity of revivencia, it doesn't come from a textbook. It comes from seeing how it's handled in real time. That's why the training includes something called the shadow mentor experience.
Okay, let's talk about that. How is shadowing a mentor different from just classroom learning?
It's an advanced observation program. The students aren't practicing, they are witnessing a master practitioner handle live, real sessions. So when a client goes into that expanded state and starts an intense reliving, well, all sorts of things can happen. Resistance, emotional floods.
And the textbook can't really prepare you for a client who is suddenly, with full sensory detail, reliving being burned at the stake.
Not at all. Or how to manage the confusion when a trapped soul fragment is suddenly free. This program gives them a real practical understanding of the dynamics, how to maintain safety during an intense revivencia, how to read the subtle cues. It builds the confidence you need to do this work responsibly.
So ultimately, the practitioner is learning how to guide someone back to, well, back to wholeness, to reclaiming that inner peace, that emotional freedom and spiritual integrity that was lost to the trauma.
And as the sources say, this work changes the practitioner just as much as it changes the client. You can't walk someone through their soul's deepest dramas without it changing you, too.
This has been a really profound look at healing. We've talked about the combined power of introspective hypnosis, the pure technique of past life therapy, that critical mechanism of revivencia, and the core issue of soul entrapment that makes all this work so necessary.
I think the main takeaway is just acknowledging that our suffering is often multidimensional. And so healing has to be too. You have to face the emotional energy that's stored across lifetimes. Understanding it intellectually is step one, but that somatic, energetic release, that's the only path to real freedom.
And to leave you with one final thought, this one connects to the nature of consciousness itself. The source material mentions that regression might actually help some highly sensitive people. People who struggle with conditions bordering on psychosis, specifically by helping them figure out what feelings and images belong to their current life and what might be coming from, well, from other dimensions, from past lives.
So if our consciousness can store and be influenced by events that happened before we were even born, what does that say about the true, unacknowledged power and vulnerability of our minds right now?
Think about it. What part of your own emotional reaction today, however small it seems, might actually belong to a moment your soul lived through centuries ago, just waiting for you to come back and finish the scene? The journey to know yourself, it seems, is much, much longer than just one lifetime.